Good morning, this is Jim Williams with the Hurricane City Tropical Update for September 16th, 10:30 a.m. Here's the graphical weather outlook from the National Hurricane Center. We have two systems we're keeping an eye on this morning. Hurricane Nadine in the northeast Atlantic, and we have Invest 92L down near the Windward and Leeward Islands. We're going to focus mainly on 92L in this update, but just want to mention Nadine is a hurricane out here, and it's heading, meandering over here, and could end up affecting the Azores. Now, the Azores were affected back in August, and I'll pull the graphic up here for that. You can see that the system made landfall, Hurricane Gordon, back on August 19th as a Category 1 hurricane with winds around 85 miles an hour in the Azores. And this one could very well follow that track, but it probably will not be as strong as Gordon was, but indications are it could slow down as it approaches the Azores and spin around near there, so they're going to get bad weather again. But when they were hit back in August, I was monitoring the webcam in the Azores, and it hit in the middle of the night, knocked that webcam off the air, and they just recently got it restored. It was about maybe a week ago that they got that camera back online, so they took a hard hit in the Azores over there with power outages and everything else, but it looks like this one may affect them as well, but maybe not as bad as Gordon. But we'll keep track of it anyway. Anyway, there's no threat to the western Atlantic basin from Nadine. It's going to just meander around out there and eventually weaken. But again, our focus is on the situation going on in the Atlantic with Invest 92L. So let's go ahead and get to some images here. First of all, let me show you a close-up visible shot of Invest 92L, and it's really hard to pick out a center here, but I believe that the center is right about here, twisting right there. You can see some banding features like this, and then you got a little feeder band down here to the south. So, and then of course we have rain moving into the northern Leeward Islands. We're not going to feature any cities in the Leeward Islands right now because there's really no organized center, nothing to track as far as the center of circulation, but looks like this will get into the Caribbean, and then things could get a little bit more favorable, but it's going to be interacting with land. Some models take it further west, deeper into the Caribbean. Let me get to all that scenario, but right now, again, if you look at the animation, you can clearly see this thing wrapping up, but there's not a lot of convection associated with it. And there's a reason for that, because the high pressure that needs to be over the top of this system to ventilate it and help the clouds build up into the atmosphere is off to the northeast. If we look at the wind shear analysis from the University of Wisconsin, you can see exactly what I'm talking about here. We have this big high pressure system off to the northeast of the circulation, and that's kind of forcing winds out of the south where the center would be, and it's not really an ideal situation for development. Not only that, but we have sinking air out in front of this system, and it's just not a real ideal situation for development. And plus, I'll show you another graphic coming up here where the pressures are kind of high right now in this area, and you like to have lower than normal pressures to get development going. Now, there are lower pressures over here toward the western Caribbean, but right now in the eastern Caribbean there's kind of rising pressures here, so this system's going to struggle for the next few days, I believe. Now, there is a hurricane hunter scheduled to go out there tomorrow in the eastern Caribbean, so we'll see if they find anything out there, but it looks like there is a center of circulation. It's just not very, very well defined, and near the surface is kind of maybe in the mid levels. We'll monitor the system closely. Here's the 48-hour GFS model. This is for Tuesday the 18th, and what we have is a high pressure up here in the North Atlantic off the coast of the northeast U.S., and that would indicate to me that we're going to see a steering flow that's going to take this thing generally west, and that's what the models are indicating, that we're going to see a general west to west-northwest track through the Caribbean Sea and maybe getting into the western Caribbean, which at that point things could get a little interesting. In fact, you go out to the last week of September and early October, and there's low pressure somewhere down in this area here. So there's some indication that whatever gets over from Invest 92L could develop in the western Caribbean and then start meandering off to the north. Some of the models want to take it near the west coast of Florida at the end of the month, so we'll monitor that. There's a lot of things that can change between now and then. The question is this thing even going to survive and develop at all? Here's an interesting shot. This is the GFS model for the 24th of September. This would be right around the time that whatever Invest 92L becomes would be in this area over here. Notice there's a high pressure parked right here. This is the 24th. And if this pans out, and the GFS has been a very good model this year, if this pans out, I believe the steering flow would take this into Central America. So that would be on the 24th. If that ridge is there, like the GFS indicates, that this would not be a threat for the Northern Gulf or any of this area, it would be more or less heading west. So we'll monitor that closely. All right, let's take a look at the water vapor loop and see what's really happening here. And what you have is a series of upper level lows typical for this time of the year. We have Nadine out here. We have a big trough out here, and you can see that tail coming down here and causing the west winds up in here. And we have 92L right here trying to develop, and we have the sinking ear out in front of it. But what's interesting, if you put this in motion and watch what's happening here, there's an upper level low that's in the eastern Gulf of Mexico. Let me stop it right here and circle it. Right in here, there's an upper level low, and this is cruising off to the west. So if this 92L makes it over in this direction, and we have the upper level low heading towards 92L, it could create some shearing situation down the road in this general area down in here. So this may not be a real favorable situation for this system developing. You know, I've been saying this about the GFS all season long. It's been a very good model, and right now the GFS is showing really virtually no development with this, at least for the next week or so, until this system gets into the Western Caribbean and parks itself over here, which could be a different scenario at that time. But again, as the map I just showed you, the 24th takes it into central, or at least a high pressure ridge parked off the east coast of Florida, could send this off to the west into Central America. So all things to consider when you're looking at 92L. If you're living in the Northern Gulf, coast of Florida, just, you know, relax. It doesn't mean that there's a hurricane coming or anything like that. This thing could very well cruise into Central America. All right, let me switch sources here and show you one other image, and that is the ship and buoy data out here in the Caribbean. Excuse me. We have Invest 92L, and here's the models overlaying on top of the buoy maps, and you can see the models are generally west-northwest, and the thing that's another reason why I don't think this is going to develop anytime soon. If you look at the pressures out here, 2991 and rising. Now this is north of the center of circulation, and over here in the Caribbean we have 2997 and rising. So we have rising pressures out in front of that. That's really not favorable for development. So this may just continue to be an open wave or tropical invest for the next several days as it moves into the Caribbean. And I think this is going to, in the long run, this is going to end up developing potentially when it gets into the Western Caribbean Sea, and then by then I'll have more update videos. You'll have a better understanding of what's going on at that time. But right now, all indications are this is going to remain weak until it gets into the Western Caribbean, where it could potentially develop late in the month here, as this will be a slow progressing system. Anyway, that's it for now. Be back with another update in a few days, depending on what happens with Invest 92L. Again, the recon's going to be out there tomorrow. Who knows? Maybe we'll have a depression out of this. But right now, nothing major out in the Atlantic to worry about. That's it for now. Thank you again for visiting Hurricane City.